Hey, everybody. Bill, how you doing?
Good for you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here for episode number 127 of Tech Sales Insights. Really excited to have today Bill Walsh, who's SVP of Global Business Operations at, I say Dell EMC. I know you're supposed to say Dell, but I got my EMC heritage, so I just can't shake it. And I won't ask you to comment, but I guess you're really the wind beneath the wings of Billy Scannell.
I've been known to be that. Yeah, no, Billy's awesome. Love working with the guy for so many years.
Amazing, crazy. So I tell him he should write a book on how to survive and thrive in a lot of different environments. But
yeah, you start with survival.
God bless him. Anyway, our title topic today is driving sales productivity. So you're certainly the master in several ways of that. We're also sponsored today by the Alexander Group. So thank you to Alexander Group. At a high level, if you think about Bain, McKinsey, that I would argue are kind of more white collar. Alexander Group is really the blue collar version of that, and a lot more specific and a lot more helpful around your go-to-market planning, comp, structure, comparables, all things like that. And I know they've helped Dell EMC for a long time as well, with a lot of your folks, Bill. What else? Oh, also for a sales community, Tucker, maybe you can post it for those that are members. Thank you very much. For those that are not, Tucker will put up a free link. You can go to salescommunity.com. And on the website, either hit Spring Free or you can hit the Spring Free link that is shown here. So getting on with it. So Bill lives outside Boston, Massachusetts. Interests besides work and family is a growing golfer. So I think, like me, you can get a birdie or par or several strokes over. So usually pretty helpful getting some dots in the golf tournaments. And although we were talking before, although we've known of each other for a long time, we've only recently met. But I certainly can vouch that you're highly respected and have done an amazing job in a huge, fast-paced and high growth environment of EMC and then Dell. By way of introduction, I also have some nice comments from Dan Campbell. Dan says Bill is the OG of modern business operations. He moved from traditional sales ops to combining sales ops, sales finance, and marketing ops into business ops 20 years ago. So I guess you're ahead of your time. What was now considered RevOps, you already had that structured 20 years ago.
Yeah, we did. Sort of it kind of pulled it all together back because we thought it made sense.
Awesome. And Dan goes on to say he had teams building intelligent pivot tables out of multiple Salesforce and Oracle platforms and publishing BI reports using PowerPoint and Adobe long before the modern business ops tool sets. In addition, he's a great partner to sales teams and coming up with creative ways to win through competitive deals. If there was a master class for business ops, Bill would teach the class. How about
Very kind of Dano.
All right, very good. So anyway, Dan, thanks. Dan and Dan's recently gone over to Arrow, I think in a president capacity running the Americas or North America or something like that. So, all right, we have a couple comments. We have Tucker behind the scenes helping as always. So Tucker, thank you so much. We have Ted from Alexander Group that says, thanks for the nice comments, Randy. Obviously, Ted, very well deserved. And Jesse says, great interview here. We'll see. Jesse, you're passing judgment before we actually do it, but hopefully you're foreshadowing well. And for those that are following along, you can see us or hear us. We cannot see you. We can see what you post. So feel free to make any comments or ask any questions as well, and we'll do our best to get to it. So jumping right in here. So Bill, what about starting off with your professional background after Bentley? What was your first job?
So I went to Bentley College back in the day and got out of there as a finance major. And my first job was with a company called Dennison Computer Supplies, the original floppy disk manufacturer. I'm dating myself. Did that for about 5 years and then made my way to digital equipment. Spent a number of years at Digital, both in finance and operation kind of roles. did a couple tech startups back in those days, left and came back, and then was recruited into EMC back in the late 90s. Initially sort of running sales operations North America, and then sort of grew it from there. So been a fun ride for a number of years.
Awesome. I've been looking, I think you're all in about 25 years then. It kind of
25 years August.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. I've enjoyed most every minute, put it that way.
Excellent. Ever eventful for sure. So maybe get a nice watch or something like that. So as you look back in your I'll say your ops capacity, are there kind of one or two things that you think in particular have made you successful?
Well, I think there's a couple different things. I think comes back to the old adage that many of us learned early on. I mean, at the end of the day, it's that staying power, that ability to stick with things, to work hard, to show up every day, be hanging around the hoop. And then really to put yourself, me supporting sales organizations, I tried to look at the work through the eyes of sales and made sure that I was really there to support them, because ultimately we need them out there doing what they do best. So that's how I sort of viewed the work, and that's what made me sort of propel the way I was able to.
Awesome. Great. And we have our title topic is driving sales productivity. So a lot of things obviously come underneath that, but kind of at a high level, kind of how do you think about it?
Look, I mean, we've been on this journey for many years, both at EMC and in Dell. And ultimately, the mission has been to try to drive top line at a much faster rate than we're driving OpEx. And over these past number of years, a lot of companies made huge investments in operating costs, supporting sales. And now we're looking to get that payback. So sort of the mission that we've been under for the last 5 years at Dell and prior is, how do we transform our go-to-market motion to drive incremental sales productivity? And that's whether it's driving growth or whether it's unstacking coverage or whether it's getting more effective channel programs, but it's all oriented around, how do we actually get better leverage out of our operating cost model? And it's not just driving revenue. Obviously, ultimately, it's about driving margin dollars is what we've been on a mission to do.
Awesome. That's great. So you mentioned unstacking coverage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, let me back it up a little bit. I mean, the first thing that we've done, and I've talked to a number of other companies that are going through the same process, is first of all, segmenting the market, making sure you have an ability to segment the market. We've used a fair amount of advanced analytics to go off and do that. We do it by line of business. We look at aggregate market opportunity. We look at share of wallet, but we segment the market. And then with that segmented market, it's what are those coverage models you need by market type.
And can you maybe give some of the examples of the kind of how you view the?
Yeah, so the way we viewed it, we have an enterprise segment. Typically, we have about 3,000, I'll talk about Dell now. We get about 3,000 accounts in that segment. These are big customers, complex solution buyers typically. They need a pretty sophisticated selling model with a number of people that are actually selling into those entities. You begin to go down the stack, we get into our corporate segment in our public sectors. They also can be complex, different characteristics, obviously, with public than you'd have in some of the private. And then as you go down the stack further, you get into the medium business. And so we orient our coverage models depending on the size of the business and the complexity in the lines of business that we're selling. You go further on the stack, we predominantly are selling, more velocity-based products. You go up the stack, you're selling more complex solutions.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned channel before, so you kind of can also segment and align channel partners. There might be some niche ones that maybe know financial services or have great accounts, or ones that CDW, SHI, Connection, et cetera, that are maybe stronger in the SMB space. The WWT might be stronger at the global space. So you try and figure out, I guess, kind of Greg.
Exactly. I mean, you want your partners oriented to the solutions that you're selling by segment. And in our case, we have predominantly a collab motion. So we collaborate with our partners. We are both calling on the end user, trying to bring the best value to the customer base as possible. And look at it in Dell, 50% of the business is through the channel. right? A lot of it is glove in hand with our direct selling engine, calling on the end user accounts.
Awesome. And then trying to figure all that out also is always the art and the science around, kind of how do you figure out ultimately the rep territories, right? So it's great from a corporate perspective. You want to do all this, but then you want to make sure you've got, reps that aren't going to be either, wrongly enriched or starve either, right?
Yeah. And so, we've actually, we spent a lot of time in this area because we came to the conclusion a number of years back that a well-formed territory, not only does a rep with a well-formed territory perform better, but with a well-formed territory, you get much better revenue lift,
right.
And so we've looked at a lot of different attributes around how do you bring a territory together in a way that makes sense analytically. And it's, it would be, driving distance, it'd be size of account, it'd be common vertical, but there could be applications that they leverage, customers leverage, but we try to build a territory that, first of all, needs to warrant the size of a rep. So when you have an outside sales rep covering a territory, it needs to be big enough that it can afford that coverage model. But as best as possible, we want those territories to have similar characteristics because when they do, we get way better leverage out of them. No big surprise in that, but it's amazing how often territories aren't put together in a way that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And also, you always have to watch out, right? Because there's always different models year to year or every couple of years. And how do you take into consideration the importance of that, account relationship? So you may want to break the model and say, okay, we're going to go industry. But if you have somebody that covers multiple ones and has a great relationship, you have to figure out, how do you also value that executive relationship?
So we're really careful about that. And I know everybody else is as well. But that level of churn, we measure the churn. In any given year, we want to minimize the level of customer relationship churn as much as possible. And when we do things like well-formed territories, we typically look at the outliers. What are the most egregious territories and how do we begin to get them aligned?
Yeah.
And then balancing that with the level of churn that makes sense, right? When Dell and EMC came together, we had a fair amount of churn early on, as you can imagine. And then so we've been very focused on minimizing that because, ultimately the relationship is really what drives that business model.
Yeah. And I'm sure, I don't want to have you say anything you can't say, but I'm sure also you kind of, EMC was set in their ways, Dell was kind of set in their ways. So, obviously with Dell acquiring, there's probably some work there that needed to be done to, figure out kind of, how do you not break everything?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that it was more complementary than you would have thought because of where EMC played and where Dell played typically. And both had really strong sales forces, but we had similar models in that we had an account executive that owned the entire relationship. And there were specialty positions around that. And how we organized that by segment came together in what I would consider a pretty reasonable way. Obviously, there were displaced individuals on accounts because we could only have one account executive, but we were able to manage through that pretty quickly. The work really, when it came together, was as much around how do you organize countries, how do you organize segments, and we spent a lot of time driving what we call a globally consistent go-to-market motion. We had, as a lot of companies, the country models were king, and every country ran it a little bit differently, and it was really difficult to scale. So we put in place a much more globally consistent go-to-market motion, obviously allowing people to tweak things at a local level, but keeping it 90% the same. And that's one of the major benefits we get in scaling the operation in a more efficient way.
Awesome. And then to go along with all that, then you have to make sure the right compensation plans in place that drive the right behavior, that reward the right behavior.
Yeah. And we, it's funny, I've been doing comp plans for a long time. And within Dell, Michael Dell personally gets deeply involved in our compensation plans to ensure that the way that we have them organized, the strategies, the way we incent people are directly aligned to the company strategy. And when we roll out quotas, what we do is we want to roll them out to the business plan. So we have a very tight process to ensure that the sum of our quotas tie to our business plan. We don't let people overroll dramatically. We do not let people underroll. And we ensure that those compensation plans that are in place, and we measure them at a crazy level of detail, directly support what we're trying to achieve as a company. So we that's an area that we've spent a lot of time on. And honestly, we do the same thing with our channel incentive plans, our rebate programs, also very much aligned with the way we want to compensate to make sure they align with the company's strategies.
Absolutely. I always say the best thing any leader, but a sales leader can do is to make sure you've got fair comp plans. So you have fair comp plans, they're motivated right, everything's set, they want to overachieve. If you don't, wheels come off the bus, right?
Yeah, it's both. Look at it, it's having a fair comp plan, but one that is easily understood.
Yeah.
I've got involved with comp plans that you had to be a rocket scientist to figure out what the hell was going on. And we need a comp plan that was simple, straight to the point, is transparent, and you can articulate easily why the comp plan set up the way it's set up.
Yeah.
So, simple and transparent.
Yeah. So for the size that you all are, when is the fiscal year start, and kind of when do you have to have the territories locked and have the comp plans locked? Because it's obviously requires a lot of pre-work.
Yeah. So we do, our fiscal year starts in February. So we're on a February to February model. We set our quotas for most of the businesses twice a year. For the smaller mid-market territories, we do those quarterly. And so we have a pretty sophisticated shot clock that we drive against. So we're looking for, about T-minus 60 to get territories locked down. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to stay that way, until the last, but at least get the fundamentals, make sure the fundamentals are in place. So we'll begin. Hey, look, right now we're in the middle of, are we going to make any adjustments to the next half comp plan, right? So we're looking at that stuff now. Territories we lock down, we begin to lock them down T-minus 60, and then obviously we allow changes right up to about a week prior. But we roll our quotas. Again, we have 25,000 sellers. We get our quotas out in about, for our direct sellers and our sales reps, we want them out within 3 weeks of a quarter.
Wow.
So we're not, we're, many companies our size are out there 6-7 weeks. That's just not the way we operate.